So let's look here now. And according to the book of Judges, we also know that Eglon was a king of Moab who oppressed Israel. He was the head of the confederacy of Moab and Ammon and Amalek, and their assault on Israel. We also know that one day Ehud, E-H-U-D, came representing a customary tribute and tricked Eglon and stabbed him with his sword. We see that in the book of Judges. So we know now that Ruth decided to stay with her mother. And Ruth says, entreat me not to leave thee. In verse 16 of chapter 1, she says, entreat me not to leave thee or to return from following after thee. For whether thou goest, I will go, and whether thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be what my people, and thy God shall be my God. Verse 14 says, and they lifted up their voice and wept again, and Oprah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave unto her. So according to the rabbis in the Talmud tradition, claim that Ruth was Eglon's daughter, according to this tradition, as well as Oprah. So what happened to Oprah? We also know, according to history, that it was the springtime when Ruth and Oprah stood on the road leading from Moab, east of the Dead Sea, to Bethlehem in Judea. Naomi, their Jewish mother-in-law, bade them farewell, and she was destitute. Her husband and her 2 sons were deceased. The boys' wives were Moabites, foreigners to the people of Israel. And Naomi had nothing to offer to them. I can't give you no more sons. I have no more sons to give you. So she suggested that they return to their mother's house until they can find themselves some new husbands. And when the girls protested and said they would follow, Naomi knew that they could not find acceptance unless they became believers in the one true God of Israel. Ruth made her confessions in faith in Jehovah God, but her sister Oprah decided to stay and turn back. And so the name Oprah means the nape of the neck, which is nape meaning N-A-P-E. Her name means the nape of the neck, and this was a polite way of naming the woman who turned her back on her mother-in-law in 10 years. So her name was, so her nature was. So Oprah figured out that she could do better by returning to her mother's house. Her grandmother was the queen, married to Eglon, the Moabite king. And princesses did not have to die of hunger as widows in a foreign land. And so the granddaughters, we see that now these are granddaughters, had married the sons of Elimelech, a wealthy prince in Judah, and the son of Salmon. He had been driven by famine from Bethlehem and arranged with a political advantage marriage for his sons, forming an alliance with the king of Moab. I want to try to get history here now. And after the death of Elimelech and his sons, there was nothing left for the widow Naomi except the family property in Bethlehem. And those times the land remained the possession of the family. It was like a life insurance policy to the widow. So we know that Ruth became the great-grandmother of King David, and her name is found in the line or in the lineage of Jesus' ancestors. But what happened to Oprah? Because I want you all to look here now. The connection. David, great-grandmother, is Ruth. But what happened to Oprah? Now, the Jewish rabbis tell us in the Agana that the name of Oprah was Harafu. It's in the scripture according, and that is spelled H-A-R-A-F-U. She did find a new husband, and again the result of a shrewd political alliance between Eglon, king of Moab, and the Philistine king of Gath. And in those days, there were still giants living in Moab. And most of them had moved to the coastal land. And Oprah became the wife of one of these Eminem or giants. And she bore him. Now, see, I want to look now. So Oprah became a wife, but she's also connected to Ruth. Ruth, now the great-grandmother of David, but her sister or sister-in-law, because they could be considered sisters, her sister-in-law, as the Jews believed, the rabbis, that they were blood sisters, that they were princesses. So we see now that Oprah became the wife of one of these giants, and she bore him 4 big boys. We looked last night as we moved over into 2 Samuel chapter 18. We see another war break out, about 3 other wars break out. But Goliath has brothers, the seed of Goliath. Goliath also has children. And the names were Ishbibenob, which is Ishbibenob, and the other one was Seth, Saph, and the other son was Lemmi, Lahmi. Then we also have Goliath. So when the boys were full of age and mature fighters, Goliath challenged the army of Israel and was killed by, we know, David. Goliath's grandmother, Princess Haraful, whom we call Oprah, according to Jewish custom, was the sister of Ruth. So there is some kind of connection here. And so having killed Goliath, David was challenged in a subsequent battle by brothers of Goliath until all of them were killed by the leaders of David's army. Oprah was an aged woman when Abishai, a general in David's army, attacked Ishbibenob, her last living son, according to Jewish tradition. And she tried to hinder Abishai from killing her son and died in the effort. So I want to look at some. So we need to begin to understand the connection that we have here, because some of the things that you're fighting today has history connected to it, and you must find out the source so that you can destroy and kill the source to end the war. So we see much in this story here. As David kills this Goliath. So let's begin to look at how do we kill the seed of Goliath. Because we see this battle raging. We see this battle going on. And when we go down to a little further, we see these constant battles. And in verse, and then in verse 54, we said David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. And we see these battles going on. And so how do we kill the seed of Goliath? And so as we're going through this message, we need to begin to get some spiritual strategies and spiritual strategy as well as spiritual warfare. And so it's meant, as we go into this teaching is meant to introduce you to the format that it's going to take. And as you listen to this message, I want you to begin to pause periodically to begin to listen as I be taking you into some prayer points. Yet we need to begin to discover that some foundations were laid in the Old Testament, and so the Bible describes the relationship between the Old Testament and the New Testament. For example, the Old Testament is called the shadow of what is to come in the New Testament. Don't you get that? So the Old Testament is a foreshadow of what is to come. So your history is a foreshadow of what is going to show up in your future, in your tomorrow.